leadership from the upperclassmen, and I don't just mean tell them where to be. And there's going to be real accountability for that. You know, we've got some guys getting ready to go into a big brother mode that there'll be a big accountability there. Our upperclassmen will be as responsible for the underclassmen as the other way around, and when that time comes. So I'm not sure on the exact date. It's when the second session starts. Some will be after the Indiana All-Star team is finished. So it's sometime in June. But the great news is we get to work with the players this summer. I mean, that'll be, I mean, there couldn't have been a better ruling in my mind and probably in a lot of other guys' minds. And the fact that we've been given April weekends to recruit, which is so valuable. They've taken some away from July, but that's fine because you still get enough time in July to go out and recruit and see players. But most importantly, you get to work with your most important players, which are the ones you have now. So that'll be good, and that'll help us to get a running start with them this summer. But really, it's going to be how the upperclassmen bring them in, and because it's going to be incredibly competitive. I mean, incredibly, and that's what I feel. But I think the players will all feel that as well.
How much of a challenge is it going to be for the staff to maybe juggle? You have a team that just went to the Sweet 16, and maybe some of the starters are going to fall back.
It's not going to be a problem for the staff. Wasn't a problem last year. You know, it's not a problem at all. And again, when people make those assumptions and projections, that's all they are. They're just assuming. I mean, it'd be crazy for me to sit there and look at what a lineup could look like. The best thing for us, and the thing that we have to have, which we have still not had, it was much better this year than it had ever been, without a doubt, but we've still never had great depth, which allowed us to be truly deep. And I'm not saying we will now. On paper, we potentially could, but that's on paper. That's on past experiences, and that's on potential of newcomers. And you don't win games on past performance. You don't win games on potential. You win them on actual results and production. So that's what has to start to get established. But I think it's always good when those guys get up here and they can be around the guys in the spring. I know they've done that a little bit. And I've had a chance to see some of them during this last recruiting period, go in and make some points, and watch a lot of film of a ton of film of our incoming players. And that's helpful too, because then you can, now it really feels like we're getting ready to coach them. You know, before you were trying to help them be better in their own program. Now you're really getting ready to coach them. And so there's a different transition period that you go through as a staff. That's all I'm concerned about.
You're obviously still one of those scholarships, 14 guys for 13. I guess what's your plan on handling that? What's kind of your timetable by when you have that?
There's not a big plan, and there's really not a timetable. Those things work themselves out. They always have. So, but again, it's the way that it is. It's not a. It's certainly something that's, you know, on the horizon, but there's no timetable to it.
When do you have to have that taken care of? By the fall semester?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
When you're dealing with recruiting like some of these events we do weekends, in general terms, in terms of evaluating players, do you get more from watching, say, a team work out, or when they're actually playing games against, you know,
Well, I love, if I had my druthers, it'd be to see as many practices as you could, at high-level practices. But it doesn't work that way because you can't do it this time of year, but usually when teams are practicing, we're practicing. So when we can hit an occasional practice, I always like to do that. But I think it's the more real competition you can see them against, the more different competition. During the season, always want to see them at home, want to see them on the road, want to see them in at least one rivalry game, you know, and also want to see them a lot of times in a game maybe where they're supposed to do well, maybe where they're on paper in the past they've been better than that team. See how they handle that game. Do they keep playing as hard through it? When you've got a short window like this in April, and you can see somebody play a couple times a night or a couple times a day, that's invaluable. And it's a great evaluation time. I mean, it's just you can gather so much. I mean, so much. And then you can start to compare that to their high school films and the improvement that they're showing, and then you've got that much more of a gauge if you see them at your own camp or when you see them in July.
Coach, again.
He's not going live. Maurice has got to become as hard a worker as there is on the team. And that's not always been who he's been. And that's who he's got to be. He's got to get into that Will Sheehy, Victor Oladipo, Jordan Halls, I'm going to be in the gym morning, noon, and night type of mindset. because he can't play yet. And we haven't put him, we put him in a few small contact situations, but nothing in the sense of live and going up and down the court, and he's not really playing in the pickup games and things like that. So we have high expectations for him in-house. There's no question about it, and to become, to control what he can control. You know, certainly he's got to get his lower body stronger, continue to as his lower body heals up completely. You know, we're still fighting some of those things strength-wise because of all the different injuries that he's had to his lower body. Needs to continue to build his upper body strength, but he needs to get back to being one of the best shooters really in the country. Because when he got hurt the first time, that's basically where he was heading. And it wasn't like that his sophomore year because he just wasn't back enough yet. But he's got to get into that mode because it's going to be very competitive for him. And this is the time of year where you can get a jump on that if you have some things that you can really fall back on. And his shot and his ability to shoot the ball and play in pick and roll and things like that are going to have to be things that he has to really do. But I'm very optimistic based on our 3 weeks of offseason. We're goal-oriented. I mean, we're short-term goals. And there's certain destinations that you want to end up with. We had the same thing this year. Nobody was asking us about it in the spring and summer, but yet we had them. And the team had them, and the team felt them. And I think that's very, very important. And I think that's what it all comes down to. Outside expectations, they're fun to talk about. Every once in a while, they're fun to read about, but they have nothing to do with what's going on inside the building. What their goals are and where they want to go with it and what they're willing to get out of one another and demand from one another, that's what really drives it. And this time of year, it's that improvement, it's that togetherness and toughness and camaraderie in the weight room. I mean, this is a group that's had more 6 a.m. lifts than they've had afternoon lifts. And there's a toughness that they're building, that they're continuing to build upon. So if you start jumping ahead and getting too caught up in the destination or the points that are down the road, you really, really do your team a disservice. And so no coach wants to do his team a disservice. We want to hold them to a very high standard that's continually raising on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's what we're most locked into.
Coach,
Dustin, I'm sorry, Terry. I'll get Dustin next. Go ahead.
It's more of a college basketball question than an IU-specific question, but there's so much being made of all the movement, transfer-wise, 400 players or whatever on the list. I mean, is that good for college basketball in your opinion? Do you think something there needs to be, I don't know, reform there?
I haven't thought about what reform would be, and it would be just hypothetical for me to think about that anyways. I think the transfer numbers continue to go up. I don't think there's any question about that. I enjoy reading some of the things that some different talent evaluators or writers point out in those situations. There's every recruit is a case study upon itself, just like every transfer is a case study unto itself. And I think as long as there's going to be third-party influence in these type of situations, and it's not just college basketball, it's college sports and in general, it's high school sports. I don't think there's any clear-cut answer, and I don't know if there's a certain amount of reform or a certain rule that would play into it. But I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. I think it escalates like we saw last week. It escalates and it becomes a main talking point. But situations have been going on for as long as I can remember.
But does it change how you recruit somewhat? I mean, in terms of maybe wanting to leave an open space for that?
Well, sure. I've made the point before that I learned a lesson back at Marquette, and after our third year, we had 3 players leave, and it was back when the 5-8 rule was in effect. So we come out the next year, and we're getting walk-ons. We got one walk-on. They averaged 8 points a game in high school. Now, that would have been a high score for us when we first started here, but we had to get enough guys to practice with, get on the team, because we could only have 10 guys on scholarship. And we went to the Final Four. Of course, Dwayne Wade had a little to do with that, and Steve Novak and Travis Diener and all those guys. But I learned a lot of lessons back then. I learned to always plan ahead when you have a potential great player, and I learned that you don't want to be – a lot of people want to have scholarships sitting there, for them. I'm really not always of that mindset. I'd rather be prepared for the rainy day and, So that's where oversigning in the past has come in. I mean, I think it's a really big deal. I mean, it's an awesome way to include our fans and our students and so many people that have had such a hand in keeping the enthusiasm and the energy and the togetherness alive in this program over the last few years. And the Indiana fan base has always been nationally renowned, probably world renowned. But I mean, it's definitely been something that somebody like me that didn't grow up here always knew how great the Indiana fan base is. But until you're inside of it, and then until you go through something like this and then see the comeback of it this year, you have no true appreciation. All of you do because you're here. But any chance we can get right now to keep including everybody inside of that, and another way to say thank you, another way to interact, another way to bring it together. And we'll get to the point where we have banquets again and formal sit-downs, I guess, maybe, but this is great, and I'm glad we're going to do it, and thankful that JD and people over in the athletic department and Beth and Jade in our office have been working so hard to put all this together.